Are code enforcement officers simply city revenue collectors under the guise of code enforcement? I used to believe code enforcement wanted to ensure city ordinances were followed and citizens were being safe. Originally, I was cited for the city not having a permit on file for the work I did on my back porch, but the supposed violations changed each time I proved I was compliant. It did not seem they were interested in whether or not I was actually within compliance, but if they could find a way to get me to pay a fee. Eventually, the code enforcement officer just decided to give me a citation for court. Here is the original ordinance I was supposedly in violation of, essentially saying that any owner who desires to make any changes to their home that involves any construction codes must first make an application to the building official to obtain a permit. I have 3 decades of experience in residential construction, and had also reviewed all the construction codes prior to making any changes to my porch and knew I did not need a permit. You do not need a permit for every alteration you do at your home, otherwise there would never be disputes on whether one was required or not. In response to this first citation, I provided photo evidence and detailed descriptions of the work I had done on my porch to both the code enforcement officer and the lady at the building department. Essentially, I removed my screen and put sheathing up in its place and took some vinyl siding from within the porch to cover the sheathing. I did not move or add any doors, windows, or walls, nor replace the vinyl ceiling or floor, nor fully alter the porch, as these changes were only meant to last for a few months, after which I plan to remove the sheathing and put the screen back up. I addressed each bullet under the When Do I Need a Permit page on the Peachtree City website, detailing how they did not apply to my project. I further discussed how each construction code and the International Residency Code, such as electrical, plumbing, and mechanical, were not applicable. I offered anyone could come see the porch in person to see how insignificant the changes were. I explained the levels of alteration to them, and how mine was clearly a level 1 that does not require notifying a building official or obtaining government approval via a permit. My alterations were simple and did not change the path of egress from my living area into the backyard. Other examples of level 1 alterations are replacing vinyl floors with tile in a bathroom or repainting a living room. Despite demonstrating my subject matter knowledge and proving I was compliant with both city ordinances and building codes, the ladies in code enforcement and the building department still insisted I was wrong. I pointed out that section 18-111 is only applicable when work is regulated by construction codes, which mine was not. I asked that they provide an email stating exactly what construction codes they believed were applicable. The email they sent me consisted of these 4 city ordinances. I immediately felt I was talking with unprofessional and incompetent city employees. The first ordinance is simply a statement of fact that there is quite literally no way for me or any homeowner to be in violation. Despite my photos, step-by-step description of the work I did, and telling them in person that my project did not include any electrical or plumbing work, they still claimed the next 2 ordinances were applicable. Did everything I say go in one ear and out the other? Did they even look at the photos and document I provided? The last ordinance is just the original claim I needed a permit, which at this point I had repeatedly shown was not applicable since no construction codes were involved. Finally, they agreed to schedule a time for the building official to come see my porch in person. The building official agreed that none of the work I had done involved any construction codes. By all measures, this should have been the end of this. However, he claimed I changed the occupancy of the space when I replaced my screen with sheathing, which is a misuse of that building term. Most people do not know what that means, and it is understandable to just trust him based on his title and position. To others, it is a misuse of that term. Here's how the International Residency Code, International Building Code, and International Existing Building Code define a change of occupancy. It is a change in the human interaction with the space. When 2 people with knowledge and expertise on a subject argue different points, do you just believe the one with the title and position, or listen to both and then decide? I tried to explain to the ladies of code enforcement and building departments that I did have that knowledge and expertise, and explain to them what a real change of occupancy was. But obvious to me by this point, nothing I said mattered because they had already determined I was guilty and should pay a fee, and they would just keep changing the supposed reasons if they had to. The only other mention of change of occupancy in Peachtree City's ordinances falls under the existing building section of the residential code. As you see, a change of occupancy is due to the change of occupancy classification. The building official did not mention this for good reason. It would expose the fact that he misused the term. There are 10 occupancy classifications, shown here with descriptions of each. As per Peachtree City Ordinance 18-101B, shown a moment ago, identification of a change of occupancy classification is required to declare a change of occupancy. And as you read through each description, you can see why the building official is unable to state how my porch now classifies. Because the occupancy classification of my porch has not changed from residential group R. This means that the occupancy of the space has not changed, and this understanding exposes how the building official misused this construction term. The building official is limited to interpreting and enforcing construction codes, as per this section of the Peachtree City ordinances. Note that the building official is not authorized to interpret or misinterpret construction terminology. Not only did the building official misuse a construction term in an attempt to mislead others, he was outside of his authority in interpreting and enforcing construction codes. I reached out to the city council seeking assistance with this matter and suggesting the city attorney get involved. The code enforcement officer threatened that if I did not immediately apply for a permit and pay all fees by lunchtime the following day, she would give me a citation for court. As no one would listen to me, and I did not like the idea to stand alone against the power of government in court, I went to the building department to find out what it would cost me to pay and make this go away. She was happy to tell me it was more than $500, and in addition I'd have to apply for a new permit and pay more money to put my screen back up in a few months. I only spent $100 in materials, made insignificant alterations, repeatedly proved my compliance with all construction codes and city ordinances, and knew the occupancy of my porch had not changed. But no matter my innocence in any wrongdoing, the city seemed to insist that I pay one way or another. Both options were unacceptable, and I wanted to hear from city council and city attorney, believing they would see the legal side and side with me to put an end to this. I believe they would understand the building official was outside of his authority and misused the change of occupancy term. The code enforcement officer refused to wait, happily giving me a citation for court, which ended any further discussions. I asked her why she was choosing to escalate, as I knew it was entirely her decision, and she said that although I've been proactive and responsive throughout this matter, she felt enough time had passed, and I was now only dragging things out and wasting everyone's time. City Council member Frank DeStadio replied to my request for assistance and said he had spoken with Ms. Robin Caillou, the Director of Planning and Development who oversees both the code and building departments. Through their discussion, we found that the building official had lied about the work I had done, used words out of context, and gave misleading statements. As someone I viewed as a peer, I did not want my work to be judged as incompetent. I wanted him to know I only temporarily replaced the screen with sheathing, and it was my intention to return things to normal after a few months, as to explain why I did not fully alter the room. My minor alterations were purposeful and exactly how I intended them to be, and I never even hinted this was a reason not to get a permit. I told him I had only taken siding from inside the porch to cover the sheathing. I did not move or add any doors, and I did not add any air conditioning. There was always a window AC unit that we used on the porch. And he worded my use of an extension cord in a manner meant to imply I did not have power and was having to source power from the house in order to have power on the porch. And notice he did not mention that I had informed him I had decades of experience and knowledge in residential construction. When Mr. DeStadio visited my porch to see everything for himself and compare with the claims by the building official, he agreed I was completely correct. However, despite him speaking on my behalf with his knowledge as a civil engineer and recognizing the legal points I made, he told me I was simply outnumbered by those in positions of power that refused to listen. Upon being confronted with evidence that he lied his statements to Ms. Caillou, the building official chose to double down. He continued to use temporary out of context, and he claimed without any evidence that my porch does not function as a porch anymore, and applied no argument against such a statement as sufficient, as if it is my duty to provide proof that my porch is still a porch. It is in fact his responsibility to provide proof that it has changed. Referencing the Oxford, Collins, Merriam-Webster, Cambridge, Wikipedia, and Britannica dictionaries for the definition of a porch proves him absolutely wrong. By every definition, my porch is a porch, and according to any source, the purpose and function of a porch is to serve as a transitional space between indoors and outdoors. His supporting evidence that the occupancy of the space in my porch changed is based on convincing others my porch is not a porch any longer. And again, he did not mention what occupancy classification he claims my porch is now. As I've shown in this presentation, the building official is counting on others to trust his title and position and not recognize his misuse of construction term to fit his agenda. Claiming I enclosed the porch was worded intentionally to imply it was not already enclosed. A screen porch is an enclosed porch by every construction definition. International Building Code Chapter 10 covers means of egress to mitigate risks associated with the occupants of a building evacuating in the event of an emergency. It refers to porches and decks that are enclosed with insect screening. In other words, when a porch is screened in, i.e. enclosed, steps must be taken to ensure safe means of egress. A flex interior room continues to give the impression that I took an outside area and incorporated it into my interior living space. This is an obvious attempt at persuasion because there is no such thing as a flex interior room. What it refers to is actually called flex spaces or flex rooms. A flex space or flex room is a space that a homeowner can use however they want, and it doesn't change the occupancy of the space. It can be inside or outside, and porches are considered flex spaces. The original owner of my house had a hot tub on the porch, and the previous owner was a boxer and used the porch as a gym. We use it as a comfortable area to study and take tests for online university. Homeowners can also create flex spaces out of dining rooms, living rooms, or spare bedrooms, for instance, without changing the occupancy of the room. Any space can be used however the owner chooses, unless in a manner that changes the occupancy classification from residential. In this last bullet, the building official touches on the possibility that others are going to realize the occupancy did not change. In that circumstance, he wants them to believe any kind of alteration requires a permit because the word alter is in section 18-111. This goes back to the earlier point I made that if this was true, there would never be a disagreement on whether a permit was ever needed because you would always need one. No matter what you alter in your home, you would need government approval and oversight. And remember the 3 levels of alterations that I mentioned? Notice how he worded this to make it seem like my alterations were huge and affected a big area by claiming I altered the building itself. Is an ordinance violation notice actually a guilty verdict in disguise? If code enforcement does not care if you are in compliance and insists only on you paying a fine, are they not simply city revenue collectors? It appears no one wanted an honest discussion to assuage any concerns because they weren't concerned at all. They could ticket me and my only choice would be to pay a fee or face larger fees in court, and they face no repercussions or financial threat for their decisions. What are my options? I have proven I am compliant with every construction code and city ordinance, and the one person that listened, a city council member and civil engineer, agreed that I am right. But we are powerless against those with the ability to ignore facts and just punish those that don't give in and pay up.